Welcome back to Slightly Another Story. Every story begins with a single question. We've already asked a couple of them. Tonight, we ask another, and follow where it leads. What if Lucifer never fell? What if the greatest act of rebellion in existence never happened? What if the line between good and evil was never carved by defiance, but left blurred by choice? Before Lucifer became a symbol of darkness, he was something else entirely. In the ancient theological imagination, he was the morning star, a being of light, intellect, and proximity to the divine. According to interpretations drawn from texts like Isaiah, Ezekiel, and later Christian theology, Lucifer was not a monster lurking in shadows, but a radiant presence within heaven's hierarchy. An angel entrusted with brilliance, beauty, and authority, close enough to the throne to glimpse the structure of creation itself. Heaven, as described in these traditions, was not chaos. It was order layered upon order. Thrones, dominions, powers, archangels, each role precise, each will aligned. And Lucifer stood among the highest of them. Not merely obedient, but aware. A being capable of understanding his place, and questioning it. Then comes the moment that defines everything. In our familiar timeline, pride curdles into rebellion. Lucifer turns inward. I will ascend, the text suggests. A challenge not just to authority, but to the idea of limits. Heaven fractures. War erupts in the unseen realm. Michael rises as enforcer. Lucifer falls, cast out, exiled, transformed. The angel of light becomes Satan, the adversary. Eden follows. Temptation enters the human story. Sin gains a voice. Evil gains a face. From that fall flows the entire moral architecture of our world. Humanity's struggle is framed as resistance against an external deceiver. Redemption becomes rescue. Evil becomes something that whispers, seduces, corrupts. The universe itself organizes around opposition, heaven above, hell below, humanity caught in between. But what if that fracture never occurred? What if Lucifer, standing at the edge of defiance, hesitated? Imagine heaven in that suspended instant. No thunder. No war cries. No casting down. Just silence stretching across the celestial order. An angel aware of his own brilliance, choosing restraint instead of rebellion. A decision so small it leaves no scar in the sky, yet so immense it reshapes everything that follows. Without a fallen angel, there is no singular adversary. No embodiment of evil to point to. No cosmic enemy to blame. Eden does not become a battleground of deception. Humanity enters existence without a whisper urging disobedience, yet still carrying freedom. And that raises a dangerous thought. If evil is not introduced from the outside, where does it come from? Heaven holds its breath. The rebellion does not ignite. Lucifer does not fall. And in that silence, history begins to split. The rebellion that never was. What if the rebellion in heaven never began? In this altered timeline, the defining rupture of existence simply doesn't happen. The moment that should have ignited cosmic war dissolves into something quieter, and far more unsettling. Lucifer does not raise his standard. No angels choose sides. No thunder splits the courts of heaven. There is no casting down, no exile, no transformation into Satan, the adversary. Instead, there is hesitation. Lucifer stands before the divine order fully aware of his brilliance, his proximity, his potential. But rather than turning that awareness into defiance, he restrains it. Whether out of obedience, reflection, or an understanding of consequence, the choice is made not to rebel. The war in heaven never erupts, because it is never declared. The immediate consequences ripple outward, not with violence, but with silence. Michael, long understood in our mythology as the warrior and enforcer, never raises his sword. His purpose shifts. Without an enemy to defeat, his role becomes one of guardianship and balance rather than judgment. Gabriel, the messenger, continues to speak truth, but without warnings of war or impending fall. The heavenly court remains intact, its hierarchy unbroken, yet subtly altered by what did not occur. There is no cosmic fracture. No hell carved out as a place of exile. No adversary rising to stand in opposition. The universe no longer organizes itself around a simple polarity of absolute good versus embodied evil. Heaven remains unified, but unity without opposition begins to feel fragile. Authority itself changes. Without rebellion, obedience is no longer proven through resistance. Loyalty is no longer tested by conflict. Free will still exists, perhaps more clearly than before, but without a visible consequence to define its limits. Angels are not compelled by fear of falling, nor shaped by the memory of one who did. Choice becomes quieter. Harder to measure. More personal. This is not utopia. Beneath the surface of harmony, new uncertainties emerge. If no one has ever fallen, how does one recognize the boundary between devotion and dissent? If no angel has been cast out, what becomes of ambition, disagreement, or doubt? Heaven has order, but now it also has unanswered questions. Silent tensions. Unspoken possibilities. And those questions do not remain confined to the celestial realm. Before humanity even draws its first breath, the structure of existence has already shifted. Creation unfolds without a built-in enemy. Eden is not prepared as a battleground. There is no deceiver waiting in the shadows. No external voice poised to whisper temptation into human ears. Which leads to a far more dangerous realization. If evil is not introduced through a fallen angel, if there is no Satan to corrupt, no devil to deceive, then whatever darkness emerges in the universe must arise from somewhere else. From within choice itself. Heaven stands whole, but changed. The rebellion never comes. And in its absence, something far more unpredictable begins to take shape. Power without a rebel. What if the greatest rebellion in existence never happened? How would authority truly function? In a heaven untouched by revolt, power no longer defines itself through opposition. There is no enemy to crush, no traitor to cast out, no dramatic proof of supremacy. Authority must justify itself quietly, continuously, and convincingly. The absence of Lucifer's fall does not freeze heaven in perfection, it forces it to govern. The hierarchy remains, God at the center, archangels arrayed in purpose, but its meaning subtly shifts. In our familiar mythology, order is preserved by punishment, rebellion answered with exile, dissent answered with judgment. Here, there is no such precedent. Loyalty cannot be measured by resistance overcome, it must be earned through coherence and trust. Lucifer, still radiant and influential, becomes something unprecedented, a reforming presence within the system. Not an adversary, but a voice that asks why things are as they are, and whether they could be otherwise. His brilliance is no longer feared as a threat, yet it cannot be ignored. He shapes policy through persuasion rather than defiance, pressing for clarity where tradition once sufficed. In this heaven, ideas compete more than forces ever did. Michael's role transforms just as dramatically. Without a war to fight, the enforcer becomes a stabilizer. His strength is redirected inward, tasked with preserving balance rather than delivering punishment. He guards the structure itself, ensuring that debate does not become fracture. Gabriel, the messenger, carries fewer warnings and more explanations, truth delivered not as command, but as context. Power redistributes along quieter lines. Councils form where decrees once fell like thunder. Decisions take longer. Consensus replaces fear. Heaven becomes a place of negotiation rather than judgment alone. Stability benefits those who thrive on continuity, caretakers, record keepers, teachers of law. But others lose relevance. Without rebellion to define them, warriors fade into ceremony. Without exile to threaten, punishment loses its edge. This stability has a cost. Without a clear enemy, disagreements no longer resolve themselves through conflict. They linger. Moral ambiguity spreads. Competing visions of order coexist uneasily. Some angels favor strict hierarchy, others adaptive balance. Dissent is not crushed, but it is contained. Harmony is maintained, yet it begins to feel curated. History offers a parallel. Empires without external threats often turn inward. Power struggles grow subtle. Authority relies on persuasion instead of fear, but persuasion demands constant effort. In heaven, absolute harmony breeds a new instability, stagnation at the edges, suppressed questions at the center, quiet ideological fractures that never erupt, yet never heal. Then comes the twist. To preserve unity without coercion, heaven institutes a reform. Choice itself is decentralized. Moral agency is no longer resolved solely above. Creation will carry it. Humanity, soon to emerge, will bear the weight once absorbed by rebellion and punishment. Not as a test, but as a necessity. Without Satan to oppose heaven, the burden of choice shifts downward. Power remains intact, but responsibility moves. And with that decree, the consequences of heaven's politics begin their long descent toward the world below. A world without an adversary. What happens to wealth, labor, and ambition in a universe without a fallen angel, without temptation as a driving force? In this altered timeline, economy is no longer fueled by fear of loss or hunger for excess. Without Lucifer as a corrupter, human desire evolves differently. Value is not defined by what can be seized before it is taken away, but by what can be sustained. Wealth becomes quieter, slower, less spectacular, and far more stable. The political order of heaven, reshaped in the previous chapter, casts a long shadow over the material world. With no cosmic war echoing through existence, history unfolds without recurring apocalyptic collapses. Civilizations rise, but they do not burn as brightly or fall as violently. Economic cycles lengthen. Booms and busts still occur, but they are muted, more like seasonal shifts than earthquakes. Continuity, not crisis, becomes the guiding principle. Human societies resemble slow-growth civilizations from our own past. Early agrarian empires expand cautiously, prioritizing irrigation, storage, and stewardship over conquest. Medieval-style guild systems emerge across cultures, not as temporary stages, but as enduring foundations. Crafts are refined over generations. Knowledge is guarded, passed down, and improved incrementally rather than disrupted. Trade routes follow a similar logic. Instead of domination, they focus on sufficiency. Long-distance trade exists, but it is purposeful and restrained: grain, tools, medicines, texts. There is little appetite for luxury empires built on excess. Resources are managed with the assumption that they must last, not that they can be replaced through conquest or exploitation. Forests are harvested slowly. Mines are regulated by communal councils. Wealth is measured not by accumulation, but by resilience: full granaries, stable families, predictable futures. The cause and effect is unmistakable. Without a cosmic enemy, fear-driven hoarding declines. Without demonic temptation whispering shortcuts, ambition becomes communal rather than predatory. Success is shared, because isolation offers no advantage. Without moral collapse narratives, no great deceiver to blame, long-term planning flourishes. People build for descendants they expect to know, not empires they expect to abandon. This world stands in sharp contrast to our own history. There are no speculative bubbles driven by frenzy, no economies addicted to perpetual growth, no scarcity-driven empires devouring the margins of the world. Exploitation still exists, but it is socially condemned rather than celebrated as cleverness. Profit without provision is seen as failure, not triumph. The winners are unexpected. Artisans, teachers, healers, caretakers, those who preserve and sustain, gain status and influence. Their work stabilizes communities. Meanwhile, conquerors, raiders, and extractive elites slowly lose relevance. Without endless crises to exploit, their skills offer diminishing returns. Yet beneath this prosperity, a paradox begins to form. Slower, fairer economies also reduce urgency. Risk-taking declines. With fewer existential threats, the drive to gamble everything for a breakthrough weakens. Innovation still occurs, but it moves cautiously, ethically, incrementally. There are fewer leaps, fewer revolutions. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, a new concern emerges. In a world without temptation, prosperity grows, but hunger for transformation fades. Progress continues, yet its pace slackens. Stability becomes strength, and possibly a limit. As humanity settles into this balanced abundance, one question begins to haunt the edges of civilization. Can a world that no longer fears collapse still find the courage to change? The answer to that question will not come from markets, but from science, invention, and the restless human mind that follows next. Progress without temptation. What happens to science when curiosity exists, but temptation does not? In this world, knowledge still calls to humanity. The urge to understand the stars, the body, the forces of nature remains deeply human. But something crucial is missing, the whisper that says faster, more, at any cost. Without Lucifer, without a demonic presence framing knowledge as forbidden fruit, science grows along a different axis, not upward in bursts, but outward in balance. The stable political order of heaven and the slow, resilient economies below it quietly reshape innovation. There are fewer wars to accelerate invention through desperation. No arms races demanding superiority. No existential threats forcing breakthroughs overnight. Progress is no longer driven by fear of annihilation or domination, but by continuity, by the belief that tomorrow will come, and that it should be cared for. Medicine is the first field to feel this shift. While weaponry lags behind our timeline, biology advances earlier and more deeply. Physicians focus on prevention, longevity, and understanding the body as a system rather than a machine to be repaired after damage. Plagues still occur, but responses are communal and methodical. Ethics develop alongside medicine, not in reaction to its excesses. Healing becomes a moral practice as much as a technical one. Astronomy follows a similarly restrained path. The heavens are not targets to be reached or conquered, but texts to be read. Telescopes are refined not to claim territory, but to observe order. Humanity maps the cosmos with patience, seeking meaning rather than expansion. There is no rush to leave the earth, no dream of escape from a broken world, because the world itself has not been broken. Engineering reflects this philosophy. Cities grow denser but safer. Buildings are designed to last centuries, not decades. Infrastructure prioritizes resilience over speed. There are no sprawling factories built for endless consumption, no landscapes stripped bare for rapid growth. The industrial revolutions of our history arrive late, softened by restraint. Energy systems favor sustainability long before scarcity demands it. The contrasts with our own timeline are striking. Firearms exist, but they remain crude and limited. Weapons of mass destruction never materialize, there is no ideological or apocalyptic pressure to create them. Communication technologies evolve to preserve and transmit knowledge across generations, not to manipulate populations or mobilize them for conflict. Information spreads slowly, but reliably. The cause and effect is clear. Without temptation, fewer shortcuts are taken. Without fear of total collapse, fewer extreme innovations emerge. Science does not lunge forward, it walks. Rivalries exist, but they lack the bitterness that turns competition into obsession. Curiosity is disciplined by responsibility. Yet tension quietly builds beneath this calm surface. Progress continues, but it lacks urgency. Without grand threats or forbidden frontiers, the hunger to push beyond limits fades. Humanity understands the universe with remarkable depth, its cycles, its laws, its fragility, but chooses not to bend it aggressively to its will. And so the paradox of this world becomes undeniable. Humanity knows more about existence than it ever did in our timeline. Yet possesses neither the tools, nor the desire, to radically transform it. As knowledge deepens without eruption, science begins to mirror the soul of this civilization itself, thoughtful, careful, and restrained. The question now is no longer what can we build, but what kind of people does this kind of progress create? The answer lies not in laboratories, but in culture, art, and identity, waiting just ahead. A culture without a devil. What kind of art does humanity create in a world without a fallen angel, without temptation, without a clear embodiment of evil? In this altered timeline, culture grows in the long shadow of cosmic stability. The political order of heaven never shattered. Economies learned restraint instead of excess. Science advanced with care instead of conquest. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, art followed the same path. Human expression no longer revolved around rebellion, transgression, or the romance of falling from grace. Instead, culture became a mirror of balance. Visual art tells this story first. Painters and sculptors are drawn not to scenes of chaos or suffering, but to continuity, hands passing tools across generations, cities layered with centuries of careful construction, faces marked not by anguish but by endurance. There are no masterpieces obsessed with torment or inner demons. Darkness exists, but it is portrayed as absence rather than antagonist, an empty road, an unfinished song, a choice left unresolved. Literature evolves along similar lines. Without a devil to deceive or corrupt, stories focus less on downfall and more on decision. Protagonists are not heroic because they defy the world, but because they remain faithful to it. Tragedy still exists, but it is quieter, born from hesitation, neglect, or failure to act rather than dramatic betrayal. Redemption is not a violent reversal, but a slow return to responsibility. The most celebrated epics are not about wars won, but about crises avoided. Music, too, carries this restraint. Grand anthems of conquest never dominate the cultural memory. Instead, rhythm and harmony serve ritual and reflection. Music is often communal, sung in cycles tied to seasons, harvests, and remembrance. Individual virtuosity is admired, but never elevated above shared experience. Silence itself becomes part of composition, valued as much as sound. Even language changes. Over generations, metaphors of corruption, inner demons, and total war slowly fade. Speech gains a richer vocabulary for patience, duty, stewardship, and balance. People speak less of fighting their nature and more of carrying it. Moral struggle is not framed as a battle against something external, but as a negotiation within the self. Words for evil remain, but they describe actions, not entities. Everyday culture reflects this worldview. Festivals celebrate cycles rather than victories, planting and harvest, birth and death, repair and renewal. Myths persist, but they rarely feature a singular villain. Instead, stories warn of imbalance, arrogance, and neglect. Heroes are remembered for wisdom, restraint, and the ability to prevent harm rather than to defeat enemies. The most revered figures are not those who broke the rules, but those who understood why the rules existed. The contrast with our own history is stark. There is no romanticization of rebellion as identity. No cultural obsession with darkness as proof of depth. No fascination with fallen figures whose suffering redeems them. Art does not glorify the abyss. It studies the edge, and steps back. Yet unease slowly enters this cultural calm. Without a devil to blame, humanity must own every shadow within itself. There is no external force to accuse, no great deceiver to point to when things go wrong. Every failure belongs entirely to human choice. Every cruelty lacks a cosmic excuse. Art begins to circle this discomfort, cautiously, almost reluctantly. And that raises an unsettling question. If culture no longer wrestles with evil as something other, does it become more peaceful? Or does it risk becoming shallow, unable to confront the darkness that still lives within the human heart? As art quiets and harmony deepens, belief itself is about to be tested. Because without a devil, morality must soon stand completely on its own. Faith without a devil. What does faith become when there is no devil to blame, no great deceiver to fear, and no cosmic enemy to resist? In this world, belief is quieter and heavier. The absence of Lucifer's fall removes a central pillar from traditional theology, the idea that evil enters humanity from the outside. There is no serpent whispering in the dark, no adversary stalking the soul. What remains is a far more unsettling truth: whatever darkness appears in human life is born within human choice itself. Religion adapts, slowly and unevenly, to this reality. Ancient narratives are retold with subtle shifts. Sin is no longer framed as temptation imposed by an external force, but as misalignment, moments when individuals act against balance, community, or responsibility. Evil is not a presence, it is a decision. Salvation, in turn, ceases to be rescue from corruption and becomes something more demanding: education of conscience, discipline of desire, and lifelong accountability. New philosophies rise to fill the theological vacuum. Some belief systems center on stewardship, the idea that humans are caretakers of both the world and their own moral capacity. Others emphasize balance, teaching that virtue is not purity but correction, the constant adjustment of one's actions in response to harm caused or avoided. Schisms emerge between those who believe morality is a fixed law handed down from heaven and those who argue it is a living process, refined through reflection and consequence. Influential thinkers gain prominence not through prophecy or fear, but through uncomfortable honesty. Teachers emerge who insist that humanity must confront its own shadows without supernatural excuses. They argue that blaming evil on demons weakens moral responsibility, while owning it strengthens ethical maturity. Their words unsettle congregations accustomed to absolution, but they resonate deeply in a culture already shaped by restraint and reflection. Faith reshapes politics and daily life in tangible ways. Laws focus on prevention rather than punishment, aiming to correct behavior before harm spreads. Justice systems prioritize restoration over retribution. Rituals lose their theatrical edge, there are fewer fiery sermons and no threats of eternal torment. Instead, temples become spaces of quiet examination. Worship resembles guidance more than confession, an invitation to look inward rather than plead upward. Moral education begins early. Children are taught not what to fear, but what to carry. Stories emphasize consequence over condemnation. Responsibility becomes sacred. To act wrongly is not to fall under demonic influence, but to fail one's community, and oneself. Yet this theological calm conceals a growing tension. Without hell as a threat, belief becomes voluntary. Fragile. deeply personal. Faith can no longer rely on fear to sustain obedience. Some drift away, finding the burden of total responsibility too heavy. Others lean in, discovering that meaning forged without coercion feels more authentic, but also more demanding. There is no external judge to blame for suffering. No devil to curse when things go wrong. Every injustice, every cruelty, every neglect points back to human hands and human will. And that raises a devastating paradox. If humanity is fully responsible for evil, does that make faith stronger? Or unbearably heavy? As belief sheds its enemies and its excuses, it moves closer to everyday life, where morality will soon collide with social structure, tradition, and inequality in ways no theology can fully contain. Ordinary lives without a tempter. What does an ordinary day look like in a world where no external force whispers people toward evil? Morning arrives quietly here. Not with urgency or dread, but with routine. People rise early, not because they fear falling behind, but because responsibility is woven into daily life. In a world without a tempter, morality is not a battlefield, it is a habit. And habits shape everything. Work reflects this first. Professions are built around stewardship rather than extraction. Farmers measure success not by maximum yield, but by soil health over generations. Builders favor materials meant to last decades, not impress briefly. Healers, teachers, record keepers, caretakers, these roles carry more social weight than traders chasing rapid gain. Exploitation exists, but it is rare and remembered. Reputation matters more than ambition. Education begins early and moves slowly. Children are taught moral reasoning alongside reading and numbers. They learn how choices ripple outward, into families, communities, futures they will never personally see. Failure is corrected, not dramatized. There is little romance in rebellion here. Instead, patience is praised. Responsibility is practiced daily, like a muscle that must be kept strong. Families tend to be larger and closer knit. Intergenerational households are common, not out of necessity but design. Elders are living memory, anchors of accountability. To act poorly is not to disappoint an abstract God or break a rule, but to fracture trust built over years. And trust, once damaged, is slow to return. Social mobility exists, but it moves carefully. There are fewer meteoric rises and fewer catastrophic falls. Progress comes through consistency, showing up, keeping promises, correcting mistakes publicly. Status is earned through reliability, not spectacle. Those who seek rapid change are viewed with caution, not envy. Gender roles soften without disappearing. Division of labor still exists, but less adversarial, less symbolic. Strength is not measured in domination, nor care in sacrifice alone. Communities value balance, who contributes what, and how steadily. No one disappears into anonymity. Every action leaves a trace. Emotionally, life is steadier. There are fewer extremes of excess and despair. Fewer reckless nights, fewer dramatic downfalls. But also fewer moments of explosive liberation. Joy exists, but it is quieter. Fulfillment grows gradually, like a tree rather than a firework. This world lacks one powerful idea from our own history, the notion of reinventing yourself completely. You cannot simply run, erase your past, and start again somewhere unknown. Memory travels faster than people. Redemption exists, but it is slow, communal, and visible. And here, a quiet tension settles in. When everyone is responsible for their own shadow, judgment becomes heavier. Mistakes linger longer. Forgiveness is real, but never automatic. To be known so deeply is comforting and suffocating. Which leads to a final, unsettling question. If life is calmer, safer, and more grounded, what happens to those who long to break free? As these ordinary lives scale outward, into cities, systems, and a modern world, the cost of stability will become impossible to ignore. The world as it is. What kind of world emerges after centuries without a devil, without a cosmic enemy, without rebellion as a founding myth? The present-day world of this timeline does not announce itself with spectacle. It unfolds quietly, deliberately, like a city built layer by layer rather than conquered in a single age. From above, if one could see it all at once, it would look orderly, almost restrained. Not because imagination is absent, but because excess never became a virtue. Cities here are designed for continuity, not acceleration. Streets curve gently, meant to last generations. Buildings are constructed with repair in mind, not replacement. There are no districts abandoned to decay and no skylines racing upward in competition. Instead, urban centers grow outward carefully, guided by councils that measure decisions in decades, sometimes centuries. Expansion is debated as a moral question, not an economic race. Power, too, looks different. There are no towering capitals built around singular figures or dramatic monuments to conquest. Centers of influence gather around archives, courts of record, and deliberative halls. Leadership is collective, slow-moving, and deeply accountable. Authority is earned through memory, what one has preserved, not what one has seized. Without a devil to rally against, governance learned early that unity must be maintained through trust rather than fear. This restraint echoes through the economy. Labor is organized around longevity. Infrastructure projects are judged not by speed of completion, but by how little they must be revisited. Food systems emphasize resilience over abundance. Supply chains are shorter, more regional, and less fragile. Wealth exists, but it circulates cautiously. Accumulation without purpose draws suspicion. The moral framework established centuries earlier never vanished, it hardened into habit. Technology hums quietly beneath daily life. Power grids are stable, redundant, and rarely fail. Communication systems prioritize clarity and record over immediacy. Innovation comes through refinement rather than disruption. There are fewer revolutions, industrial or digital, and more slow evolutions. Tools are designed to endure, to be understood by their users, not mystified by complexity. Nothing here feels disposable. Culturally, the world moves at a different rhythm. Public spaces are filled with rituals of remembrance rather than spectacle. Libraries and civic halls draw more foot traffic than arenas. Art favors depth over shock. Entertainment exists, but it rarely seeks to overwhelm. The absence of constant crisis has produced a society less noisy, less frantic, but also less forgiving of carelessness. And yet, beneath this coherence, something presses quietly. Responsibility weighs heavily here. With no devil to blame, no great deceiver to accuse, every failure lands squarely on human choice. Every injustice must be owned. Every mistake must be answered for, not in fury, but in permanence. Memory does not fade quickly in a world built to preserve it. This is a stable world. A thoughtful one. A morally consistent one. But it has never faced chaos that could not be reasoned with. It has never encountered destruction that could not be traced to human hands. And as subtle fractures begin to form, questions without precedent, pressures without myth, the world stands on the edge of a test it was never designed to face. Because this time, when something breaks, there will be no devil to blame. An ordinary life, fully responsible. What does it mean to live an ordinary life in a world where no devil ever existed? In the year 2025, an ordinary person wakes just before dawn, not to alarm screaming urgency, but to habit. The room is familiar in every detail, the same window repaired twice by the same hands, the same floor worn smooth by years of footsteps. Outside, the street is already awake. Not loud, not rushed. Just present. Work begins after a simple breakfast shared with family. 3 generations under one roof is common here. Not out of necessity, but trust. Elders remember, children observe, adults carry the space between. Conversations drift easily, from weather to plans to small corrections offered without shame. Memory is part of daily life, not archived somewhere distant. The job itself is unremarkable by design. Maintenance of public systems. Record review. Teaching. Craft. Roles that exist to keep things working, not to disrupt them. Promotion is slow, almost invisible. Progress is measured in years without failure. The satisfaction comes not from recognition, but from continuity, the knowledge that nothing collapsed today. Education never truly ends. Even adults attend seasonal forums where ethics, history, and judgment are revisited. Not because someone demands it, but because responsibility here is learned repeatedly. Children are taught early how choices echo. There is no story of temptation whispering from outside. When mistakes happen, the question is never who misled you, only what did you choose. Technology hums quietly in the background. Power is steady. Communication is clear, rarely urgent. Devices are built to last and to be understood. There are no updates that reinvent life overnight. Progress feels invisible, until you notice how rarely things break. Travel is planned carefully. Most people live near where they were born, not from fear, but attachment. Distance still matters here. Leaving is a decision weighted with consequence, not a spontaneous escape. Careers are chosen for fit, not fantasy. Success means being relied upon. As evening arrives, the streets soften. Shops close on time. Public spaces fill with familiar faces. There is laughter, but not excess. Music drifts from communal halls, simple, repetitive, grounding. Entertainment does not seek to overwhelm. It seeks to remind. And yet, beneath the comfort, there is pressure. In this world, there is nowhere to hide from oneself. No external force to blame. No myth that absorbs guilt. Every failure leaves a mark, remembered kindly, but remembered. Forgiveness exists, but it is slow, relational, earned through consistency. Before sleep, the ordinary person follows a habit passed down quietly, reviewing the day in silence. Not prayer exactly. Not confession. Just accounting. What was done well? What was not? What must be carried tomorrow? One thought lingers, never spoken aloud. If everything I am comes from my choices alone, who do I become when I choose wrong? The question fades into sleep, but it does not disappear. And as millions of ordinary lives carry that same weight, responsibility begins to scale beyond the individual, toward the systems they all depend on. Technology without a tempter. What kind of technology does humanity build when there is no devil to outpace, no enemy to outgun, and no temptation to dominate at any cost? In this world, technology did not emerge from panic. It did not sprint forward fueled by fear of annihilation or the thrill of superiority. Instead, it grew the way roots do, slowly, deliberately, guided by the weight of consequence. Every major system reflects the same underlying truth: innovation here answers responsibility, not rivalry. Communication technologies were among the first to diverge. Without propaganda wars or demonic deception narratives, systems evolved to preserve truth rather than manipulate emotion. Records are immutable, layered with context instead of stripped for persuasion. Messages are slower, verified, and trusted. There is no culture of viral outrage, no economy of attention built on distortion. Information travels with friction on purpose, because meaning matters more than speed. Transportation tells a similar story. There are no obsessions with breaking sound barriers or collapsing distance at any cost. Instead, networks prioritize reliability and endurance. Trains, ships, and regional transit systems are engineered to function for decades with minimal failure. Travel is predictable, safe, and rare enough to retain significance. Movement is not freedom by default, it is a considered act. Medicine advanced along a radically different axis. With fewer wars and less crisis-driven urgency, the focus shifted early toward prevention and longevity. Chronic illness is rarer. Public health systems are deeply integrated into daily life, quietly correcting imbalance before catastrophe strikes. There are fewer dramatic cures, but far fewer dramatic collapses. Healing here is steady, almost invisible. Just as striking are the absences. There are no weapons of total annihilation. No technologies built on the assumption that destruction must be absolute to be effective. Warfare exists, but it is slow, constrained, and deeply unpopular. Conflicts are resolved through endurance, logistics, and negotiation rather than overwhelming force. Victory means stability restored, not enemies erased. There are no mass surveillance empires driven by paranoia. No industries dependent on addiction, distraction, or engineered excess. Without a tempter to exploit weakness, there was little incentive to build systems that thrive on compulsion. Entertainment technology exists, but it does not hijack attention. Consumption never became an end in itself. Some technologies here surpass ours, not in power, but in wisdom. Infrastructure rarely fails. Energy systems are resilient and balanced. Knowledge preservation is meticulous. This world understands itself deeply. And yet, it lags behind us in raw reach. There are no instant global networks binding billions at once. No tools capable of reshaping the planet overnight. No technologies that gamble the future for exponential gain. Thresholds exist, and they are respected. This creates an uneasy realization. Humanity here knows more, harms less, and lasts longer. But it also hesitates where our world leaps. It chooses restraint where we choose acceleration. Which leaves one final, unsettling question hanging in the air. If progress is slower but safer, is humanity truly advancing? Or simply choosing not to cross the most dangerous lines? The answer will not be found in machines. It will emerge in the final reckoning, when a world built on responsibility must face the ultimate cost of its restraint. The weight of choice. The most surprising truth about this world is not that it became a paradise, or a prison. It became something far more demanding. A civilization shaped without a devil did not escape suffering. It escaped excuses. From the moment Lucifer did not fall, history took a quieter path. No cosmic war carved reality into opposing camps. No eternal adversary stood ready to absorb blame. Heaven remained whole, and humanity inherited the full weight of its own reflection. Politics grew cautious without an enemy to unite against. Economies learned restraint without fear-driven collapse. Science advanced without obsession. Culture matured without glorifying rebellion. Faith endured without a villain to resist. Ordinary lives unfolded without temptation to blame. All of it traces back to a single non-event, a pause that never became defiance. In this timeline, power learned to govern without terror. Progress learned to move without desperation. Belief learned to exist without fear. Technology learned to serve without seduction. And people learned, slowly, relentlessly, that every shadow belonged to them. This world is not better. It is not worse. It is heavier. Here, responsibility never left the room. Every choice mattered longer. Every mistake lingered deeper. There were fewer catastrophes, fewer genocides, fewer apocalyptic gambles. But there were also fewer revolutions that shattered limits. Fewer wild leaps into the unknown. Fewer moments where brilliance burned recklessly and changed everything. Humanity never learned to externalize evil. And so it never learned to escape itself. Without a devil to fight, there were no crusades, but also no righteous fury to fuel transformation. Without temptation whispering shortcuts, progress moved steadily, but rarely explosively. Without rebellion as a sacred myth, stability endured, but innovation learned to ask permission. The paradox remains unresolved. Was this wisdom, or caution refined into habit? Did humanity mature, or simply learn to move carefully enough to avoid breaking itself? Perhaps the answer depends on what one believes progress truly is. Speed, or sustainability. Freedom, or responsibility. Fire, or balance. This story does not offer a verdict. It offers a mirror. And now, the question passes to you. If humanity never needed a devil to define evil, did it become wiser? Or did it simply learn to carry the weight in silence? Share your interpretation in the comments. There is no single correct answer, only perspectives shaped by the choices we believe matter most. And remember, every civilization turns on moments just like this one. A hesitation. A decision. A path not taken. If you want to explore what happens when history chooses differently again, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for the next journey into alternate history, where one choice is always enough to change everything.